Will There we go. You are live. Hello, everyone. I am Shaylana Mendez, and you are tuning into the Mental Breakdown podcast episode that celebrates Banned Books Week. We have a very special guest by the name of Miss Rakisha Kearns White. She is here to represent the Brooklyn Public Library. I will add her to the stream so that she can introduce herself and we can jump into the engaging discussion that concerns banned books and its impact on young adults. So, welcome, Miss White.
Hello, how are you?
Very,
Oh,
very good. And just give us a brief introduction of yourself, the public library, your role, etc.
okay. Well, first off, please just call me Rakisha. Nobody calls me Miss White except my children's teachers.
Okay. Okay.
um, so my name is Rakisha Kearns White, and I am a young adult librarian at the Brooklyn Public Library, the Central Branch, which is our flagship branch in Brooklyn. And I've been a young adult specialist for 17 years. So I've always worked with teens and teen programming and have been following teen trends in teen literature for the past 17 to 18 years. And Brooklyn Public Library is the fifth largest system in the United States. We have over 60 branches across Brooklyn, serving 2 million uh, residents. And we are currently celebrating our 125th anniversary this year. And for banned books has become a very vital part of our mission. It falls under what we call intellectual freedom, which is basically free and open access to information. That's the role of any public library. And the spike in banned books and challenge books over the past year has has been devastating. And we decided to take a more vocal and public stand against banning books. So we started an initiative called Books Unbanned, which we call BUB for short, in which we're giving teens ages 13 to 21 free electronic library cards to access Brooklyn Public Library ebooks and e-audiobooks, with many of them with zero wait times, particularly all the ones that have been on challenged book lists and have been banned because of critical race theory and LGBTQ plus content.
Wow. Yeah, and that's exactly what inspired me to reach out to the Brooklyn Public Library because when it comes to these topics that we discuss here on the podcast, it really just comes down to a simple Google search where it's either teens mental health or news mental health, and that specific initiative was something that popped up right from that search. It's like, wow, that is fantastic. Now, when it comes to the impact that book banning has had here in Florida, I know that one of the main books that I was specifically surprised was banned was Stamped by Ibram X. Kendi, because that was a book that was gifted to me by, I believe, my uncle. And I was like, it was factually based. It was
An uncle was married to a Jewish lady.
right, an uncle that was married to a Jewish lady.
A black
So
man married to a Jewish
I
lady.
was wondering. I was like, why was this banned? So that just brings up the first question that I have for you, which is why are these specific books being targeted in the first place? And what do you think has led to the uptick of books being banned or them being tracked by the American Library Association?
Okay, so the American Library Association always keeps a running tally of book bans and challenges across the United States. That's just one of the things they do from their Office of Intellectual Freedom, because it's important to know these trends and how to prepare library systems and librarians for how to deal with it. But has been the right now we're experiencing the highest spike in book challenges in oh, since they started. I want to say almost in 20 years. Um, Now, with the specific titles and themes of the books, they're challenging and banning. I personally think, and And I would even go as far as to say that many people in our profession believe that these books are targets because they do not adhere to the American mythos of exceptionalism. The United States as a nation has committed genocide, enslaved people, and they have created a caste system where white straight men are designed to be on the top. As Black and Brown, Indigenous, LGBTQ plus, and women have become more vocal about our oppression and have started to make headways in society and fighting for our rights, the backlash has come forth. Um, we're trying to hold the white patriarchy accountable, and those who are in power are the white patriarchy. They don't want to be held accountable. So if they can erase opposition through books, they'll do it. And this is why there's an uptick in these particular areas. We can see it through what's going on with the Supreme Court. So, and that's more macro, but now it's happening in more micro in school boards and libraries across the nation.
Okay, and just taking that one book that I mentioned, Stamped by Ibram X. Kendi, the focus is less of accountability and simply education, specifically for young adults when it comes to the origins of racism. So what was the basis for that book being banned?
It's admitting that Americans are racist. If you have a book saying that racism exists and that the system of government has a racist foundation, then that's forcing people to admit that they have had some type of privilege or that they've been complicit in racism, either directly or indirectly. And a lot of people don't want to admit that. And again, it's saying that America isn't great. You know, we had a Black president, so racism is supposed to be gone.
Okay.
This book says it isn't. And so people can't face that.
Okay. And you mentioned, so the macro scales, like banning books, nationwide through libraries, and then you have the on a micro, banning of books on a micro scale, where it's like within school libraries and within classrooms. So if we were to focus in on that, like in a Texas school district, where what was it? They removed. Let me see. It was discussing the removal of a book last fall, and you had Pulitzer Prize winning historian Annette Gordon Reed tweet, "They don't want their kids to empathize with Black characters. They know their kids will do this instinctively. They don't want to give them the opportunity to do that." So how does that ring true to you with books just that highlight Black characters?
Okay, so the diverse books are books in which whiteness or Christianity or heteronormativity are not the center of the plot. So it includes body diversity and gender diversity, neurodiversity. In short, this book's not about straight, able-bodied, neurotypical white people. And for the history of this country and the history of pop culture, we've all been taught that white people are the default, and they simply shouldn't be, because we are a country of more than just white, able-bodied people. White teens and children, really, like all children in general, will develop better social education and emotional IQ and empathy when exposed to the stories of people who are not just like them. And empathy is a skill that can be reinforced and taught. BIPOC and LGBTQ plus and differently able teens and kids need to see themselves represented so they don't feel alone in society. And white and fully able straight teens need to see other types of people represented so they understand that the world is bigger than film. So then the first time he tried to cut it back, he's like, oh no.
Right. Right. And how important is it for students then at an earlier age to expose themselves to books that represent them? Because I know at least when I was younger, I had my mom constantly expose me to books that told the stories of powerful Black and brown and women of color in general. Michelle Obama, First Lady Michelle Obama, and Condoleezza Rice, and Josephine Baker. So just women across industries and professions, but women regardless that were making change in those industries and professions. So with that, what role do you think parents play in exposing their children to books that represent them?
Well, I'll tell a story. I'm 50 years old. So I grew up in the 70s. I was born in 1972. And the first book that I received and read and saw, which has someone that looked like me, was Snowy Day by Ezra Jack Keats. And Ezra Jack Keats was a picture book illustrator and author who really became famous for having Black and brown kids in his stories because he was an immigrant. He grew up in East New York, Brooklyn, and he would see children's books and be like, this is not the world I live in. And so it was very important to see people that look like us. Even on Sesame Street at the time, where the little illustrations and cartoons just had Black children and Hispanic children that looked like my neighborhood. It was really important to see us on TV. It's even if we were living in a perfect world, well, as perfect as the world can be without this uptick in book banning and book challenges, it's always important for parents and caregivers to, especially if you're in a marginalized community, to introduce books and media that reinforces the fact that your child or your family are not alone.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because we are in a society that if you are different, you are meant to feel alone. It actually reminds me of a stand-up special almost 30 years ago that Jon Stewart did, where he's talking about the United States is not a Christian nation, and he would say, ask that to every Jewish person at Christmas time if the United States is a Christian nation. He's like because everywhere during December, he said he would see Christmas decorations and lights and songs, and and every single radio station would have on Christmas music, and he would go, he made up a little tune. He's like, Christmas time is here again, except for you, you you, and so he would feel left out, and so when I think about that joke and I think about today, it is really important that everybody feels represented, and parents and caregivers and teachers need to go out their way to make sure the materials represent what the nation is. And we're not all white Christian nation. We're a nation full of religions and full of races, ethnicities, and languages, and we have to try our best so children and teens don't feel alone. Because when children and teens feel alone, we see what happens when kids and teens feel alone or abandoned. And unfortunately, you'll have gun school shootings and gun
Yes.
those type of situations when people are feeling alone and ostracized out of their community.
And on the topic of students feeling alone, you have instances not only with books but with films that can trigger something in students. Because I know when I was younger, probably in middle school, our teacher played in honor of Black History Month, 12 Years a Slave. Right? It's like that's a little contradictory, contradictory, but or not the best way to honor Black History Month by just spotlighting that one scene in our history. Regardless, I had just left the class, and I contacted our superintendent, and I had just said that it was inappropriate. It wasn't the best, just as I'm telling you, it wasn't the best way to honor Black History Month. There were so many other books or films that we could have watched that were produced by Black women, Ava DuVernay, or just other films. There are other films or books we could have watched or taken advantage of. And fast forward to now, I have a lot of my peers, including myself, where we continue to hold our teachers accountable when books and films are used in our class that either include slurs or just spotlight that one, like I said, scene in our history. So with that, what word of advice would you give to young men and women who feel uncomfortable in their classes when those types of books and films are a course requirement, and they feel the need to stand up for themselves and for their classmates, but they feel alone in that fight? So what word of advice would you give to them?
Well, first of all, I believe you refer to Generation Z. First of all, I am impressed with Generation Z because you all do not take any junk. My two daughters, they're teens, they stand up, they fight back, they talk, they'll do a protest in a minute, and I think that is wonderful and braver than like my generation, which would be Generation X. Um, Also, I think we are at a point in history where there are so many different movies, so many much more content and books out there that represent our story and can tell an even broader story than what we've always been taught during Black History Month. Like I said, I grew up in the 70s and in the 80s for Black, and I mean, I was fortunate. I went to all Black schools my whole life till I went to university. Um, but what we got was either Roots or Eyes on a Prize. By the time I graduate from high school, I've seen Eyes on a Prize like a million times. Not that there's nothing worth learning. It's just that there's more to the stories. Um, but what I always tell my own children who they do face this because they do not go to all Black schools, just because the way the New York City school system is set up, depending on what your socioeconomic makeup of your neighborhood is, you go to a school that's less brown. And fortunately or unfortunately, that's been the case for my kids. One, it is a certain type of trauma when you're seeing these images and you're learning these things about being uh, being reduced to a lineage of being just an enslaved person or a person who's only been abused, right? And then when you're the only one in the classroom, um, and then everybody is either looking at you to absolve their white ancestors or looking at you with pity, it causes a certain type of like trauma, like you're being victimized even though you weren't there. And I don't want any Black or brown person to have to experience that in the classroom. So what I tell my daughters, and I tell them to tell their friends too, you can leave the classroom. This is triggering for me. And then you leave, and then you follow up later, like there's better ways to tell this story. There's a bigger story to tell than just, focusing on the past abuses of slavery. Let's talk about how the whole economy was built on it. Let's talk about how it led to Jim Crow, but also let's talk more about the abolitionist movement. Let's talk about more about the heroes and the fighters and those who continue to this day to fight for civil rights and equity um, in the economy and the government and in schools and education, not just focusing on this one thing. Like, we were slaves, then it was Martin Luther King, and then it was Obama, and now nothing. Unfortunately, being Black in America or Hispanic or Asian or immigrant is tied to a lot of trauma and a lot of abuse from the government. I'm sorry, not the government, but yes, the government, but also from the people. Unfortunately, that is the United States. But at a certain point, a student as an individual has to protect themselves and remove themselves from the trauma. They don't have to be re-traumatized in the classroom when they can live the trauma or they have to see the trauma on TV.
Right. And I've learned, as well as my peers have learned, that calling it out when it happens each and every single time, as aggravating as it is, or draining as it is, it reveals to you the different types of educators that there are out there. Because I know in middle school, even in elementary school, but at least my mom would call it out in elementary school, but in middle school, when I was just starting to stand up for myself, the teachers there were not at all open to feedback. It was just like, it's part of the curriculum. Sorry, 12 Years a Slave was what I included in my curriculum. That's it. That's all. And I really didn't know where to go from there. So that's why at least I had consulted my mom, and she was like, you go higher. You contact, whoever's above them. And then you see, how else to address it. And then as for high school and college, as a dual enrolled student, recently we had to read a book by, I believe, Suzanne Flannery. I believe that's her name. But the book had mentioned the N-word like several times. And I was like, nope, another email. And I reached out to her, but her response was completely different. And I just told her, because I had my research come with an informed, response to the book that she'd assigned. I completed the assignments. I was like, I'm good, but I'm not comfortable with this book. But she was open to a conversation. We were able to come on Zoom, and she was like, what other alternatives do you have? Why were you uncomfortable with the book? Why were you uncomfortable with the author? I said, if you were to just look at any of her other books, they all include the N-word at least once or twice. And she even has another book that has the N-word in the title. So it's just that.
I'm not familiar with this author. Is she African American? Is she like a historian? Is she a fiction writer?
She's from the South, and she's a historian and a white woman.
Okay, see this. Yeah,
yes,
that's a lot. That's a lot.
And the teacher's argument was that it was American history and that it had taught her so much. And I said, I understand that. And as my I again consulted my mother, I was like, just give me the well-rounded view that I can contribute to my argument here. And she had just said that students are the consumers. You just reminded me that students are the consumers. So with that said, although it may have helped you and revealed to you the different parts of American history and how this author may have helped spotlight that one part of American history, it makes me feel uncomfortable. So with this, with that, here are some alternatives to the book that we're reading.
That makes sense. We have a thing. I call it a thing because I don't know the right word to call it. But it's called trauma-informed librarianship, and it's includes like cultural sensitivity and understanding that you're meeting people from all different walks of life who experience different types of trauma. So what works for one is not going to work for others. And I think in this particular case, your professor might have taken a different approach, maybe like a more trauma-informed approach to this course, because again, it is one thing, for a white author to have the N-word on the cover of their book, and it's another thing for Dick Gregory, a Black man, to have a book with the N word on the title. It's a different context. And although the author of the book, I'm not saying she's a bad person, I'm not saying she's racist, and I'm not saying that even about your professor, but the story or the lesson that needs to be taught, I believe, should have been from uh, one of our own voices, because that's kind of like centering a white voice in the fight against racism, whereas they can bow out of the fight whenever they want. And I think it's more effective and more powerful and maybe even more sympathetic and empathetic in the writing, and less traumatizing if the voice is the person who's experiencing it. For example, Trevor Noah's book about
Yes.
apartheid. Um, even though not the same as like America's Jim Crow system, but again, just an example of here's a black person talking about how dangerous it was to be a biracial uh,
Yes.
person in South Africa, as opposed to reading a book by a white South African talking about how dangerous South Africa was, because this person had to live it, and
Hmm.
to a certain effect, his family still has to live it, even though the apartheid system is not there anymore. It's still the remnants are still there. Just like
Yeah.
in America, there's no slavery, there's no Jim Crow, but it's the remnants are still there.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's what my advice to all educators, even to like allies, parents, ally groups, center the voice of the person you're helping in your materials, in your recommendations, in your books, in your media. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I understand.
and
And
personally, 12 Years a Slave was rated R, and I can't believe they showed it to you in middle school. It's
yeah.
definitely that movie was hard for me to watch, and I was,
Yes. And she had done this warning at the start of the class. Was like, any of you can leave. I said, gladly. I will. Yeah, that was inappropriate. But
it was based on a book.
there,
You could have read the book, written by the black man who experienced it.
yeah. Yeah, I mean they're working on that for sure. And even when book banning became a lot more prevalent in Florida, and then we saw um, uh, stamp being removed, and what's the other book? Oh my goodness, by Angie Thomas.
Oh, The Hate You Give?
Yes, and that was removed from the shelves. I was like, this is ridiculous. But our
Speaking of
librarian at the time,
anti-choice.
yeah, our
Yes.
librarian at the time was like, that's not going to happen. So she put, she was amazing, but she put like probably 4 copies just at the front of the library of each.
Mhm.
And we're like, okay, but because it just made no sense that they were removed, and just doing research on them, or at least the rubric for banning books on the ALA site is like, but it was factually based, because even Ibram X. Kendi in the, I'm sure, like in the back of his book, he had all of his sources listed.
And I have to say, just in terms of people banning books, for reasons, um, like a lot of there's some banned books, like I want to say, I want to say, there was at one time, there was a fiction book that received challenges for children because the child was disobedient to their parent, and that's against the Ten Commandments. So it doesn't, the the reasoning doesn't always have to be based in hard facts. It's Even if a book is perfectly researched with no flaws in it factually, people can always find a reason to ban a book or to challenge a book. And I always, when kids ask me about what banned books is and like why would someone want to do that, or to explain it. I said, imagine if my mother came to your house and told you you have to go to bed at 9 p.m. because her kids go to bed at 9 p.m. That's what it means to challenge books. You would be like, get out of my house.
Yeah.
So, and that's, and when they get that concept, it's like, okay, that doesn't seem right. Because in your house, you might go to bed at 8 o'clock and think everyone goes to bed at 8 o'clock, but your mom is not going to come to another
Mhm.
person's house and tell them to go to bed at 8 o'clock and think that parent or child is going to be like, okay. And that's the level of ridiculousness. Um, I feel. I mean, I'm a parent.
Yes.
I'm a librarian, and I can sort of put myself in the category of educator or not because I don't actually have a degree in education, but in library science. I understand you want as a educator, parent, or guardian, putting age appropriate, thematically appropriate things in your children's hands. But I also believe that is the personal responsibility of the adult who's taking care of the child.
Hmm.
The public library, public schools, their job is to educate the masses. So you have to have a wide variety to educate the masses, and you have to let a lot of things
So
into
then
your.
is so then is the statement that the noun, I'm searching it in another tab, but is the claim that the association made for STAMP, they said it does not encompass racism against all people. So how can, or how does that relate to, what is it, like informing the masses? Like how, he couldn't have done that. The book would have probably been 4 times as long.
So that was the reason why they challenged it because it didn't encompass race against all.
Yes, it didn't encompass racism against all people, and because the book contained selective storytelling incidents.
Um, I don't have a response that's professional.
Okay. Okay.
That's 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 like saying that's like punishing a Jewish person who survived the Holocaust for not including that um, the other groups besides Jews were in concentration camps. So we're going to ban that book. They're telling their story.
Yeah.
He's
Well,
a black man talking about racism against black people in response to the police violence and things that happen. I think going as far back as Trayvon Martin and
mhm.
like just kind of how racism and active racism,
Yes.
active, started to become more prevalent after Barack Obama became president. Um, there are much more academic, intellectual, more academic books about racism as an abstract theme that occurs, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the racism that's internalized in the United States, specifically against Black people. And that's a very narrow focus, but that is what the book is about. Just like you can have a book that talks specifically about um, the anti-immigration laws that the United States used to have and how it specifically affected Chinese immigrants or the Irish or the Italians. Those books
Yes.
exist. If you were to do all the immigrants again, we'll have 1,000-page book, and who is going to read
Yeah.
that?
Right.
And you know how many years of research into doing this? No one,
Yes.
no one will read it. Um, so that's my opinion on that. That's the great thing about doing research. You can make your topic as narrow as you want it to be.
Yeah.
And if a school system or a governor or of the board of directors of a library is concerned that this book is too narrowly defining racism, go find 5 more books for each of
Yes,
the
I was
other,
just thinking that. Yes.
because they're out there.
Yeah.
Then you can, so then now people can be informed about racism against blacks, against Asians, against uh, indigenous people, against Latinx community, and and while we're at it, you know, immigrants, white immigrants, because it's not necessarily racism, but they was getting the bad end of the stick too. And also the
Hmm.
time Catholics, yeah, they were also being, as I informed my daughters, I was like, yeah, blacks were getting hung, so were Catholics and Jews. So there's a book for all of it. If you,
Yes.
if, and they will probably find a reason to ban all of it, or challenge. Someone would challenge it and to go back to what I was saying in the beginning, because though to you can't walk around with America is great attitude, which is literally the propaganda we've been taught in American history since we were little, and you can't reconcile it with also all the horrible, terrible things that the United States has done. Um, no one wants to be that self-aware, you know. Um, we give examples like Germany. Germany, racism is a straight up crime. South Africa, racism is a crime. You say something racist, you're getting arrested, because they reconcile the fact that they were, as my kids would say, they were scumbags, but now they realize their mistake and they're trying to rectify it. America has never really recognized what they were or what they are to some people, and until we can have an honest conversation, people are always going to keep getting defensive because they're going to be like, "Oh, but America is great. We're all like Chris Evans as Captain America." But America is not even like Captain America.
And speaking of what is it? Oh my gosh. Oh yes. So in my anthropology class, I love that class. Oh my gosh, our instructor is fantastic. But one of the first questions that he asked us for the start during the start of the unit was, first, is art dangerous, and then to who, you know? And so everyone had like a variety of answers. It was like some people defined art as like music, some people defined art as like paintings, viewing certain paintings and being like certain emotions being invoked, or listening to music and certain emotions being invoked. Um, so with that, like, what would be your interpretation for that? And I'm only asking because you have, at least in Florida, the Don't Say Gay bill, right? So for right, that whole thing. So like for certain books, and that goes back to representation. For certain books and certain films, are like, we don't, that may set off certain things in our kids. So just, what are your thoughts?
So is art dangerous? The short answer is yes. It is. It is dangerous, and it is dangerous in a good way and dangerous in a bad way. Um, in a bad way because if you are trying to, because propaganda can be used to sway the thought of people, and it can sway it, like in, if you're a fascist nation or if you're a nation that's trying to fight for freedom. So, propaganda comes in films, it comes in literature, it comes in street plays, it comes in movies, commercials, everything. So it it is dangerous because it has the power to sway thought and to give an idea that can be seen or heard and cannot be erased. Um, at least from the mind. Art can be erased, but not from the mind once you've seen it. Um, for example, I'm doing in a couple of weeks. I'm doing a program, a DIY arts and crafts program with the teens on activist art, um, and where we're going to be making protest signs and art about period advocacy and menstrual equity. And I was doing, research on activist art or protest art, um, you know, things that become symbols and are always associated with a certain time. Like we think about the peace sign, that was from the 60s and really about how young Americans were protesting the Vietnam War, or even the symbol of the Black Power fist. That was started off as just like a piece of art, and then it represents so much that even till to this day, it's a shorthand language. You know what it means when I go like this. A white person might feel frightened, or a person who's not African American might feel frightened, but another Black person, no matter how old they are, they know if I put the fist up like this, you know what that means. You know, um, or even like a peace sign, we know what that means. So art is dangerous in that way. Um, and also, if you have a new style, a new opinion, um, a new view, it's dangerous to the artist as an individual because they're going against the grain. And when you're going against the grain of what society is, um, what society says is the right way to be, that's always dangerous to the artist. And I'm thinking about like Paul Robeson in that factor. Here's a man who said that he thinks that society is that society is would be better if we were socialists, right? And basically he got banned out of the United States. So, and that's a way where an artist using his voice is is a danger to himself because he got pushed away out of his country.
Well, this would be my last question because when our professor proposed that to us, he was like, why is art dangerous to whom? Um,
Go to the
I
power
said, I
structure.
think, hmm?
I'm sorry, I forgot to add. It's to the power structure,
Right.
to the man, to those who are in charge. I mean, however you want to. I don't know what the kids. Now I sound like my grandmother. I don't know what the kids call it nowadays. Back in my days, we called it the man. I guess right now it's the patriarchy, the white patriarchy, or,
Yes.
or the priorarchy. That's a new phrase I know. That's intersectional oppression of everybody of genders.
hmm
I was like, oh,
I said I told him I was like I think it comes down to age or to timing because it can be dangerous if I know for certain like all my friends raised up in the digital age and era of information being super accessible. If you were to see something that is like super inappropriate at a super young age, then of course yes it can be dangerous. But if you were to have something like, let's just say, concern sexuality at maybe this age or like maybe 18, 21, then maybe it's timely. Yes. So, yeah. So I think like age and timing can tie into whether or not something is dangerous or not. So, what are
that
your, right?
that that is true. And when it comes to visual images, um, because I also teach sex ed and puberty classes for teens in the library,
Mm-hmm.
and unfortunately, at this day and age, any kid who's like 10 years old and up has probably seen some type of form of porn or not, but have seen some type of form of porn. Um, and that can be dangerous in their development if if you don't get to them and provide guidance. You
Right.
as a
Right.
parent, you
Yes.
as a caregiver, um, and there are age appropriate ways to discuss these things even before um, you can give a child, let them loose on the internet. And as a parent and as a librarian, um, I've had to teach what we call like digital citizenship
Yes.
classes. And even when I was a Girl Scout leader, there was a digital citizenship badge where we was like, if you see something on the internet that makes you feel not good or makes you question if it's bad or good, immediately go to your, and a grown up to talk about it. Um, and this is Now I'm gonna bring us back around to book banning and the type of books that they ban. If we want children to come and talk to us, trusted adults and parents, we cannot there cannot be a large vocal or even a vocal subset of adults who say you can't talk about these certain things because we are banning it. We're telling you it's bad, so don't even come to us to talk about it. And so now, not only are you denying kids access to accurate information, you have now put up a wall where
Hmm.
your children will not want to communicate with you. And then they will discover things the bad way or the wrong way. Or they'll be more susceptible to, you know, misinformation because you're hiding, banning, challenging accurate information. And we need more avenues where kids and teens and adults have access to accurate information. So when they
Yes.
see misinformation or when they are faced with a situation that they're not equipped to handle, they can go to someone and be like, "This happened. This is bothering me. I have questions about this. Can we talk about it?" As opposed to just now they know they cannot because they might get in trouble.
Yeah. Let me see. Oh, still learning this whole platform, so pardon me.
It's okay. This
Like,
platform is new to me too, but it seems really awesome.
it really is. It connects to YouTube Live and I think Facebook Live. So I was like, I prefer this, and it's easier to edit. So I was like, yeah, let's do this one. But yes, I feel like I've asked all my questions, and it is almost two, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I
Oh,
do thank you for joining me this afternoon. I appreciate it.
oh, you're welcome. Thank you for reaching out to us, and thank you for allowing me to bend your ear and push my agendas. Um, I joke about that. Well, I joke, but I don't joke. I mean, I'm a librarian. I do have my job as a librarian and my mission as a librarian. And basically, as all librarians, our mission and our value is to provide free and open access to information to the public. Um, and even though, we try to say the libraries are neutral spaces, they're not neutral because people aren't neutral and librarians are people. Um, so we want we want to make sure that book banning is not a thing. We want to
Yeah.
let people know what mass book banning and book challenges leads to. It does lead to fascism. It does lead to the end of democracy. It does, all you do have to do is think about, we learn about it in school, the Salem witch trials. We learn about it with Hitler when not North America, during the Chinese Revolution, during, every single communist thing that nation that we've learned that have dictators. And what they do is they burn books, they police thoughts. Um, when other nations go and invade nations that they're trying to conquer,
Mhm.
the things that they burn first, they burn libraries and they burn museums. So they destroy cultures, they erase the past. So it's only that they exist. That's a bad road to go down. And maybe if they weren't so busy banning books and challenging books, they would know this history and realize how anti-democratic it is to do this. These so-called patriots who think they're being so American. They're being the opposite of American. Actually, I would love to say that to them in their face. As Rakisha, the individual from Brooklyn, not as
Yes.
at the Brooklyn Public Library.
And that's all us kids ask from the adults in our lives, is just to like inspire new ideas as opposed to obscure them. Because allowing us to do that learns how, like, teaches us how to navigate like imaginary worlds, like filled with differences, and then apply whatever lessons are in books to our own lives. We can grow up to be better people as opposed to just sheltered people, as our parents like to consistently bring up. So,
Right, and I think about, take an example of the book Genderqueer and Stamp. It's like, if you are a straight cis boy or girl, you're not suddenly going to stop because you read that someone is trans. You're just going to be like, okay. And then, if you are, if you're already, like, say, racist, or even if you're not racist, you're not going to read Stamp and be like, oh, I'm going to be more racist, or I'm going
yes.
to be racist. You're hoping that your children are just more than just sponges that like are influenced as soon as they see a word and be like, all right, now I'm this. So if the way you raise your children, your belief system is so weak that your child reading a book that's opposite of what you taught them will immediately change them, then the problem is not the book. The problem is your belief system. That probably might get me in trouble, but I'll let it ride.
Well, that's the Brooklyn in
Yeah, I say
you.
that with my chest. Yeah, if your belief system is so fragile that a person reading one book can knock it all down, then maybe your belief system isn't that strong to begin with.
I feel like books only plant ideas. They don't change people. That's it.
Amen.
That's all. Well, I thank you. That'll be that. You just did it. I can call you Rakisha.
You can call me Rakisha. You can also call me Keisha. It's fine.
Okay. You know what? I keep telling everybody I was born in New York, and yet these Southern mannerisms got a hold of me. It's terrible.
Well, but right now, the way we're having a conversation, I feel like we are on equal standing. So you can call me Rakisha or Keisha. If you were coming to the library as a student, you know, I wouldn't require you to call me Miss Rakisha, but I wouldn't stop you either.
Okay. Okay.
And it makes you feel better. You can call me Miss Rakisha. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I got you. I got you. And you know what? I'll have you. But what I was saying was that little ending that you gave about belief systems.
Yeah.
That'll be the trailer for this interview, by the way. Okay. Because that was wonderful. And I'll send you the trailer when it's all edited and said and done. But again, I thank you for joining me. And I don't know when your lunch break is, but I thank you.
Fun, or is it part of your schooling, or like what made you get into podcasting? Just.
Oh yes. So in 2020, the podcast actually didn't start out as one. It was just Instagram lives that I was doing, and it was 2 months after the murder of George Floyd, and so I just wanted to address topics that concern Minority Mental Health Month, considering that July was such a month. And I just started interviewing people about topics that concern that. So the first was concerning the anxiety and depression and sadness and anger spikes following the murder of Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd. He talked about, wealth disparities. So it was just a bunch of topics. But they started out as Instagram lives, and then it became an annual thing that I did every July. And then just starting this year, I was like, I have all these interviews, and why not convert them into audios and make a podcast? So
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. You keep being you. I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you ever need a librarian's advice, on or off air, you have my email and my phone number. Please don't hesitate. I can run my
Absolutely.
mouth for days, years. I got
Listen,
stories.
absolutely. No, I love coming to libraries, just sitting there, have my computer and read. But absolutely, once, especially if I come down. Oh, actually, I got accepted into NYU. So
Okay, because that was my alma mater. I'm very,
stop,
I graduated from NYU in 1994.
Miss
I had
Rakesha.
I graduated. I had a bachelor's of arts with a major in journalism with a minor in creative writing. And then after 10 years in journalism, I went back to school and became a librarian.
Oh my gosh. So amazing to see you. Imagine that. Oh my
I'm
goodness.
gonna have to come to Brooklyn and say what's up.
I love that. Yes. Wonderful.
All
Oh
right,
my goodness. Yes. So yes. Look at that.
all
And
right.
my mom, because my mom graduated there too. She's like, you have to apply.
When did she
So
graduate?
thank you.
Did she
But yes.
graduate like in the 90s? Like,
Say that again.
when did your mom graduate from NYU?
Oh my goodness.
Did you cross paths?
Boy. She was born in 1970.
Okay, so
So
she would have. She's 2 years older than me. So if we met, she would have been a junior. I was a freshman. We probably didn't cross paths, but it would be funny if we did.
right? Be like, Miss Keisha.
Yeah, ask her if she remembers Brownstone magazine. That was the black magazine
Okay.
on the campus.
Yeah, I'll ask her. That would be hilarious. And I'll email you and be like, she did. Yes. And I'll ask
All right.
her for sure.
Okay, this has been great. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. If you need anything else, just let me know, okay?
Of course, you as well. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye now.